Development Committee. Clerks, can we get roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. On the roll, Councillor Wong. Councillor Chu.
Here.
Councillor Dhaliwal.
Here.
Councillor Pootmans. Here. Councillor Walcott.
Here.
Councillor Carra. Councillor Sharp.
Here.
Councillor Wenness. Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Councillor Chabot.
Present.
Councillor Spencer.
Here.
Councillor McLean.
Here.
Councillor Demong. Mayor Gondek.
Here.
Councillor Wong, just double checking, and Chair Penner.
I am here.
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to call 4 names. I believe they are all online. When I call your name, if you can just say, yes, I'm here. Shelley Morrison. Shelley? Okay. JoAnne Atkins?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Heather Heasman?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Abena Boadi?
I'm here.
Okay. And Shelley Morrison?
Present.
Okay, great. We're going to do this panel of 4 before I call out more names. So we're going to go in the order of Shelley, JoAnne, Heather, and then Abena. I just ask if you are not speaking, please stay muted. And when I call you, you will have 5 minutes to speak. So Shelley, you are first.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Council, Administration, all speakers and presenters yesterday and today. In keeping with democracy, transparency, accountability, and best practices in governance, we urge Council to vote separately on the recommendations before them. Having listened to the presenters over the last 2 days, it appears we have a macroeconomic situation where wage suppression due to in-migration to Alberta and Calgary is combined with unaffordable housing stock. Apparently, we don't have the labor, financing conditions, or reasonable build costs due to inflation to build fast enough, and frankly, we need immediate relief. Some have said we need a wartime response. We need to pull all the levers, including a focus on public social housing and all forms, including high-demand detached homes. So let's not tear down the affordable homes, displacing folks, especially displacing vulnerable folks. Many courageous people have shared their stories about rent-evictions. But why are rent-evictions a repeated concern? Landlords, in this current climate, certainly don't need to upgrade for renters. They have their pick of the litter, so to speak. Well, they rent-evict for short-term rentals, conversions to short-term rentals. It's a better return on investment. We all see it on our own streets. It's everywhere and at every price point. Airbnb was meant to disrupt the hotel industry. Instead, it just disrupted the housing market, which is why districts like New York use all levers available to council, like rent control and banning short-term rentals, providing an immediate positive impact to their citizens. Build stated yesterday that the demand is too high and the building industry can't deliver enough supply to lower rent due to 3 factors: financing, costs, labor. Unfortunately, these factors are not within council's control. It will take builders years, decades to resolve, if ever. So it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to chase pie-in-the-sky supply building. Housing folks and social agencies were asked yesterday and stated that inadequate wages or wage suppression was the largest barrier to entry for both rental and ownership, alongside with the lack of non-market and deeply subsidized housing. The Helsinki and Singapore models need better consideration by council and administration. But what are we going to do today? People need immediate relief before the winter, not 3 or more, 10 or more years for builders to maybe, hopefully come online with trickle-down affordable stock. If we need supply, and more supply, the good news is we have approximately 6,000 short-term rentals that could quickly return to stock both in the rental and for purchase market, diverse units across the whole city serving all areas and at a wide range of housing needs, from basement suites to luxury homes, you name it. Joel from Planning Commission, sorry Joel, I didn't catch your last name, stated that we have a deficit of 9,500 units. So 6,000 short-term rentals plus the unaccounted ghost Airbnbs would have an immediate impact on supply of housing. Ignoring this strategy amounts to a dereliction of duty with unintended consequences. It's time to serve our Calgarians in need over investors, over developers, over speculators. Council is in a unique position to legislate the use of properties, and folks from all walks of life and all political stripes have asked Council to severely limit or outright ban short-term rentals. It's time to pull that wartime lever. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Shelley. You can just mute and hang on the line until we go to questions. JoAnne, you are next.
Hello, Mayor Gondek, Madam Chair, and members of Council. My name is JoAnne Atkins, and I am the Civic Affairs Director for the Varsity Community Association. Our full submission is included in your agenda on page 314. I would like to focus on one recommendation of the Task Force 1H. This recommendation would exempt affordable housing projects from public hearings. We have a recent example in our community of why public hearings are essential to ensure that the best project possible is approved. Only 3 members of the current council were present at that public hearing, so I'll give a bit of background. If you go to engage.calgary.ca/varsity, you can take a look at the detailed renderings. In 2018, we were presented with plans for the redevelopment of Fire Hall number 17 on 32nd Avenue across from the University of Calgary. Known as the Varsity Multi-Service Redevelopment, it included an enlarged fire hall going from 3 bays to 5, as well as commercial space in a 4-story apartment building to house 48 affordable housing units. The original plans were less than ideal, to put it mildly, and it would have created a number of problems for the community. We also felt the proposal was undesirable for the future residents of the apartment building. The proposal was to move the access for the 5 fire hall bays from 32nd Avenue, a major roadway between the fire hall and U of C, to 37th Street, a residential roadway across from single-family houses. The commercial and residential floors were to be stacked on top of the fire hall. This would have significantly increased noise levels and lighting for the residents across the street at all hours of the day and night. The massive driveway and 2 roads accessing parking in the back would have reduced safety for a major pedestrian and bicycle route to the U of C. Due to the close proximity to the Children's Hospital in Vacova, we have asked the city to ensure all 12 units on the main floor are fully wheelchair accessible. We trust they will follow through on this request. The concerns and suggestions for improvement of the community association and nearby residents fell on deaf ears, despite having retained at our own cost the services of a professional planner, transportation engineer, and an acoustical consulting firm. The public hearing on the application was heard by Council in October of 2020. We were able to present our evidence and arguments directly to Council, and the application was defeated 11-3. The project was sent back to square one, and only when the applicant, which was the city administration and their consultants, were willing to collaborate on the design. The project was redesigned with the expanded fire hall bays facing 32nd Avenue, the 4-story affordable housing apartment building facing 37th Street with the landscape boulevard, and the commercial space in between the 2 buildings. If there had been no public hearing, we would have been stuck with a very poor project causing a great deal of harm to neighboring residents. As you can see from the renderings, the project looks great and will be a wonderful place to live for those very fortunate 48 families. We are looking forward to completion of construction of this development and welcoming the residents of the affordable housing project with free memberships to the community association. We are also looking to fundraise for playground equipment for the site. Collaboration between the applicant, city administration, the community association, and affected residents will always result in a better project. If you eliminate public hearings, you are shutting out the people who are directly impacted by the rezoning and their right to have input into these decisions. You will create a situation where there is no incentive for an applicant to engage with residents at all. You will also eliminate council oversight of these projects. Although it may reduce timelines for developers, this would come at great expense to our democratic processes and to achieving the best results possible for these affordable housing projects. The city's engage policy states, City of Calgary assigns a high priority to appropriately involving citizens and other stakeholders early on and throughout the process, especially when the decisions impact their lives. Eliminating public hearings is contrary to this policy and does not increase housing affordability. One previous speaker spoke about how not approving all the recommendations is un-Canadian. What is truly un-Canadian is eliminating public hearings, which are a fundamental right in our democracy and an essential component of the planning process. Please find other ways to fast-track affordable housing developments other than eliminating public hearings, which are the only way citizens can present their views to their elected representatives. It is important that the vote be called separately on each recommendation to allow full debate to occur. This would allow some recommendations to be implemented immediately, while others would receive further scrutiny and engagement. I would therefore urge Council to vote against Task Force Recommendation 1H. In my remaining time, I would like to address blanket upzoning. We oppose blanket upzoning to RCG because it is not a desirable built form on every lot in the city. The number of units and lack of parking is certainly a concern, but it is lot coverage that is the real deal breaker for a lot of people. When you have a building with 60% lot coverage beside a building with 45% or less lot coverage, you create a significant negative impact on the urban tree canopy and the adjacent neighbors. We believe both RCG and HGO should be approved where appropriate on a case-by-case basis. We could support an expedited approval process, but not blanket upzoning citywide.
JoAnne?
Wasn't it the intent of the... Yes.
Your time is up. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
We will go, so just, you can stay on the line, just mute, and if there's questions, we will come to you. Heather.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mayor Gondek, City Councillors, City Management, and members of the Housing and Affordability Task Force. My name is Heather Heasman, and I thank you for your tremendous efforts in the face of the affordable housing and housing affordability crisis facing the City of Calgary. And I do believe and agree that it is a crisis. I have spent over 20 years volunteering in and advocating for the social services sector in Calgary. I have been in vans like the one run by the Alex, in the day, in the middle of the night, in the early hours of the morning, and I can tell you that for those who are in crisis, their nightmares are real and unrelenting. They survive in places that many of us wouldn't be caught dead in. As you've heard from other speakers, this is closely linked to the cycle of mental health and addictions, which is another crisis area in this city. On average, I call the DOPE, or I guess now the HELP team, 2 times per week, as I walk regular routes to the grocery store or to my kids' school or in parks in and around my community of Roxborough. Winter is coming, there is a shortage of frontline workers, and it is not lost on me the connection between affordable housing and housing affordability, and it is a slippery slope. Funders, both municipal and provincial, I kindly ask you to remember that money given for building affordable housing structures is only part of it. Please increase and or start including maintenance and capital improvement funds in these contracts so that nonprofits will be able to maintain these structures. Please remember the importance of wraparound services to the success of providing housing, and if possible, increase your funding dollars. I highlight this because there are so many layers to this issue, and supply is only one of them. I believe that many of the recommendations in the Home is Here strategy are laudable. However, I cannot support the approval of immediate rezoning of all residential communities to RCG. With respect, I do not trust that most developers will do the right thing and build either affordable housing or increase housing affordability in many Calgary communities, despite the incentives recommended in the strategy. In my humble opinion, I do not think that developers will turn down the opportunity to maximize profits in many Calgary communities. I think that immediate rezoning to RCG without specific local planning fails those who need the housing the most, because in many communities, the housing that will be built will still not be attainable for those desperately needing the help. And I do think that applies as well to the missing middle. I think immediate rezoning to RCG is also damaging because it does not allow for the voices of community members and businesses to be heard. Council and the city asked communities to trust them during the guidebook hearings and to trust in the local area planning process. I suppose with immediate blanket rezoning, as it's being called, that the LAP process is now moot. What about considerations of 8 plexes in the floodplain, and why 8 units versus 6 or 4? The Springbank Dam mitigates risk substantially, but at the same time, will the city continue to build the 5th Street berm and berm around Earlton Station to protect these assets? Will the stampede protect its property? I think it's likely, all of which during a flood event will push water into floodplain communities, increasing the risk of people being displaced. How about enrollment caps at Connaught, Western Canada High, and Rideau Park schools? Is Council aware that right now new residents to communities within the boundaries for these schools will have their children bused to either Chinook Park, Ramsey, Woodman, and Crescent Heights schools? Are there plans to renovate our inner city schools to allow for an increase in density? With immediate rezoning, I suppose we can't have these conversations, not because they're unimportant, but because we have no voice to. And maybe our voices could help, but how will you know if you take away the voices of communities? Please remember that not everyone has the time and, dare I say, courage to speak at a public hearing. Council, I encourage you to accept many of the recommendations of the Home is Here strategy. I implore you to vigorously debate and amend the immediate rezoning to RCG recommendation. Thank you again very much to the Housing and Affordability Task Force and to all those who have shown courage in bringing their stories forward to the committee.
Thank you, Heather. Again, you can just mute and hold on the line in case there's any questions. Abena.
I'm here.
You have 5 minutes to present. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Chair Benner, Mayor Gondik, and councillors. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I really just had more of a question, it was probably addressed in all three of the 33 points. So I just wanted to know is if we are doing affordable housing, and I am all for it, just where they would be applied. I would hope that we wouldn't strategize them all in one area or concentrate them all in one area. That would be everywhere around the city. And if we do it around the city, that there's infrastructure and resources in place, because what I've noticed in my neighborhood especially is we have a lot of condos now coming up, but that we don't have any grocery stores. Transit, there's 2 buses and a train you have to usually take to get anywhere. So I'm just hoping that if this plan does go through and if this task force plans do go through, that we make sure that there's resources and infrastructure set up in all of the areas that the affordable housing will be in, because if we're going to do this, we want to make sure that people can get to where they need to get to. So my community is Redstone, and I was born in... Hello.
Just a reminder, if you're not presenting, if you're not Abena, please make sure your device is muted. Thank you. Continue. Go ahead. Oh.
Hello.
There is someone, someone who has called in to speak, and they're not muted. If everyone can just mute other than Abena, that'd be great. Okay, Abena, continue. You've got about 4 minutes left on your timer.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I'm just saying I just want to make sure that if we're going to do the affordable, if we're going to make sure that homes are available for people, we also need to make sure that resources and infrastructure is there. So I was born and raised in the city of Calgary, and I grew up in Edgemont, and I now live in Redstone. So it's the last community before you leave the city going towards Airdrie. And there was no grocery store around there other than the Costco in Balzac. So the next available grocery store, big chain, would be in Country Hills or Panorama. So I just want to make sure that we make sure that there is resources and infrastructure set up, as well as when they build these condos or townhomes or multiplexes or anything that's coming in, that we think about the congestion. So you build all these houses, but does that congest the area? So it's going to cause extra traffic in the morning for people to get to work or wherever they need to get to, or schools. And as I think somebody had said before, I think yesterday, Rowan had mentioned that a lot of these things are targeted for families, but single people also want homes. And have strived to get home. So I think we should also just make sure that we're looking at making sure that single people also would like to acquire homes, and it's not just couples or single people should feel penalized that they're not coupled. If they want a home, it should be for everybody. And I think that's what the task force also mentioned, that they're looking at those things. And for parking, the only thing I have to say about parking is specifically in Sunnyside, 9th and 2nd, there's, I know they were restricting the 2-hour minimum parking, but I find that because my aunt lives there, there's no parking for her. Like, she's 85, so she doesn't park. I drive her around, but when I go to drop her off, there's no available parking because people from the community all around the city have come and parked on her street, and it's not monitored by the city parking. And I followed the parking people, and they're not monitoring it at all. So if we're going to do any of the zoning, I don't know any of the zoning codes. I know people talked about it, RGC, RDT, RDT2. I don't know what they are, and I apologize. But if we could also make sure we look at that for older communities, that they do have available parking if they need it, and that we make sure that there's infrastructure and resources available. So thank you. That's all I had to say. So thank you. And also, you've done a really great job, Chair Penner, today in controlling everybody and working hard. Thank you.
Thanks, Abena, so much. All right, we do have some questions for this panel. So Shelley, JoAnne, Heather, and Abena, just wait. Just listen for your name to be called. Councillor Walcott, you're first for questions.
Thank you so much. This was a question for Shelley Morrison, and it was just one on whether or not any information, or if you had learned that the city had started actually separate from the housing strategy work on short-term rentals, because I'm not sure if the information's like publicly out there yet that Councillor Spencer and Councillor Mearns started that work, and I was just curious if you had familiar with it. If of course she's still here.
Hello, Councillor
Oh, there you
Walcott?
go. I got you. We hear you now.
Hi. No, I haven't heard anything in the public domain about work on short-term rentals. Seems like it's an immediate solution that we can and should address before the winter.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I just wanted to make sure that at least we had offered you that point that the work had started actually before the strategy, and maybe if there's an opportunity to connect after, we can share more about the process as it goes forward.
Perhaps it could have been included in the recommendations before you today. Seems like a very valuable strategy.
It definitely is. It was essentially just brought forward for us before the strategy. So I'd love to share more information with you afterward.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. My question is also for Shelley. Shelley, have you done some research into what other cities are doing on this front by any chance?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and would you kind of lean towards the limiting to primary residence, or have you found something else you would prefer?
Well, I'm not an expert. That would be something that I would suggest that council and administration, in conjunction with the residents of Calgary, pursue. Okay,
thank you, Shelley. It sounds like you've got your hands on good stats. Like it is around 6,000 at peak. From what we know, and obviously that's a small drop in the bucket in terms of what we have to get after. So I'm not saying it can't play a role, and certainly it's a part of the conversation moving forward and will be. But yeah, just want you to know you have representatives on council that are absolutely looking at this, and experts within our community.
Thank you. Well, 6,000 is a lot of units, and that doesn't account for some of those ghost Airbnbs that we hear a lot about.
Okay. Thanks, Shelley. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to go back to Ms. Atkins. Do you have anything to add that your time ran out, and did you want to wrap up something with the zoning?
Well, I just had one sentence left, and that was simply that I thought the whole purpose of the LAP process was to identify the areas where it was appropriate to add increased density, but still maintain the character of the communities. We've just last night actually had our second working group session for the South Shaganepi local area plan, and I think that my impression is that if blanket upzoning occurs, it's going to nullify a lot of the hard work that's been done in the local area plan. So, it's just another argument to really give some serious thought to the blanket upzoning. So that was just my last comment.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's a question we're going to be posing for admin, but thanks so much for being online, and nice to hear your voice.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there are no other questions of this panel, so we are going to move on. So Shelley and JoAnne and Heather and Abena, you can hang up now from the phone line and you can follow along on the live feed. I muted myself. I hung up on myself. Okay, I'm going to call some names just to double check. Akbar Nimji, Christian Stevenson, Kyle Parrott, Kent Manning. Kent, you can go take a chair over there. Byron Miller. Chaz Smith. You can go on over. Adam Henry. Okay. Has Asma Paveen made it back? No. Okay. Sarah Woodgate. Okay. Do I have Karen Gosley? Mohammed Chowdhury? Jeremy Barretto? Patricia Grimwald? Celia Lee? Great. Okay. I'm gonna stop there. And then I'm just gonna read out names that I have on the rest of my list. So these are the speakers that are left whose names I haven't called yet. So Abid Shah, Linda Leger, Beanie Schweiter, Candace, sorry, I need to make my font bigger. Candace Chambers, Natalie St. Hilaire, Angus Ho, Peter Dormaar, Desiree Stoodley, Harpoonit Mann, Jon Kozak, Gregory Zeech, Brian Chen, Brenda Tackaberry, and then there's actually 3 more panels after that. So just letting you know, those are the names that are still to come. We'll do this panel of 4.
This is Byron Miller. I'm here online.
Byron Miller, where did I call? Oh, Byron, perfect. I'll put you on this panel then too, and that gives us 5. Okay, so the order of this, perfect. So the order of this panel that is Kent, Chaz, Sarah, Celia, Byron. Kent, you're first.
Hello, my name is Kent Manning, and I'm here today to express my thoughts and my advice to City Council. I've lived in Calgary since 1984, bought my first house here for $80,000. It's a long time ago, but things have changed, right? I just think that, first of all, this should go to a plebiscite, a really quick, immediate one. The amount of money that we're talking about investing or getting from the federal government should have the input from taxpayers. I realize that all of you were elected. People chose you democratically. You're here as learned people, experienced to make these decisions. But I think right now, because this is so important, I think we need to have more input from the public other than just this public forum. I'm going to quote something from a good book. Proverbs 11:14 says, where there is no counsel, the people fail, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. It's a bit of a homonym joke, but we have 15 on council here, and that's not really enough for a big decision like this, I don't think. I think this is common sense. We all know that some of our city councilors are certainly not educated as city planners, come from different backgrounds, experiences, etc. But as in any organization, a restaurant, a military, city council, nonprofit organization, the test is upon this city council. This is where we really need to make a good decision. I think it would be quite irresponsible of council to not consider the input of builders and every possible resident and homeowner in Calgary. At least give them that opportunity, not just to come here and speak, but actually put it on a ballot. Not in a vote in 2 years, but right away. As we've heard a presenter from Ramsey say this afternoon, their community association no longer has a development committee because of funding apparently, or lack of funding. That's sad. City Council should fund development committees so every community association can have that kind of person involved, for future decisions like this. Because one person might have a genius idea. They might actually be a genius and not just wear a hat, I think yesterday I heard Councillor Carra interacting with a presenter, and they mentioned that housing is a human right. It is not. Just like I had to work hard to buy my first home, so do other people. There shouldn't be any handouts. We have to take care of the homeless, the disenfranchised, the marginalized people, of course. But Councillor Carrar also mentioned he's concerned about the possibility of losing out on federal monies from the federal Liberal government unless City Council passes this measure. I don't know if he said carte blanche, but basically go along with it or you won't get this money. Well, many residents and homeowners in Calgary would say that we shouldn't take threats from Ottawa and bow to pressure to join their agenda. And I would say that's my opinion too. Now, on the way in here now, after I found parking, I was speaking with a home builder on the phone who owns a sizable number of holding properties, many properties. He develops a lot, mostly in inner city areas. He builds beautiful infill, side-by-side paired houses and some multi-unit buildings. He also has some developments in Taradale where he builds single-family homes with suites in the basement. Really cool. Parking isn't a problem because he provides garages, and because of his ethnicity, he is able to make a home where grandparents can live in the basement, or there can be two brothers that have families that live in the same home. This is something, I guess, that some people want to see more densification even in those areas, in this housing crisis especially. He's recommending that if not all, RC2 zoning areas should be reclassified immediately to MC1, MC2. He says, get the lead out. We need houses for people right now. This would actually get shovels in the ground and light the afterburners for building new homes. It should be fast-tracked. And in order to do that, maybe we should reassign some of the city staff so that they can work on this project of getting all permits approved very quickly. He's got one property he's had, it's sat empty for three years, mostly because the permit hasn't been approved for 2 years. 2 years, and it's sat empty. It's an eyesore too. So he wants to develop it and provide 8 homes for people on a bus route. To wrap it up, before any possible questions, I would say I certainly hope that each one of the City Council have not predetermined their vote, but instead will consider that they are in a democracy. I would recommend that Council vote against passing this proposal carte blanche or just as a package, and that they vote separately on each of the recommendations of the blanket upzoning so that taxpayers and residents will know where each council member stands on each item. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Chaz, you're next.
Where do I stand here, I guess? Hello, Mayor Gondek and Council. I actually do have slides. I'm not sure if they're showing quite yet.
If you just give clerks a second, they'll get those up for you.
Yeah, thanks for waiting for me and calling me again. My pants actually ripped, and I was wondering if it's like I'm gaining weight or something like that, because it was like right in the leg. So it was great that I could change and get back here in time. And then now I'm questioning my diet. So I'm sure we've all had that moment.
Okay, let's not waste time talking about your pants. Go.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, so I'm here to speak on behalf of Be the Change YYC. We're a volunteer-driven street outreach organization here in Calgary. I've spoken a few times before. Next slide. So in the past year, 2022 to 2023, we served over 17,000 individual contacts. It's important to note that, again, 47% were Indigenous, and so it's important to prioritize, of course, housing specifically for this overrepresented population. 1/3 were sleeping outside. Next slide. So we handed out enough sandwiches to build the Calgary Tower almost 8 times that year, and over 83,000 pieces of food and drink items. Food is the most requested item for folks on the streets. Next slide. Our team leads who run shifts right now are nurses, paramedics, EMR. They run trained volunteer outreach worker teams of 4, often coupled with folks with lived experience to help along the journey. Next slide. Over our 8 years of operating, the most consistently requested referral year after year is for those who want and need housing. For many years, this has been the standard, and folks will wait many months and if not years. This has been happening for many years. Next slide. So this is from 2015, our Calgary corporate housing strategy. Sorry, I made a spelling mistake, obviously. I want to highlight the bottom there, that 94% of Calgarians included that affordable housing for low-income families was the second most important thing to them in Calgary. The first thing was transit. The second, 94% said, was affordable housing. This is in 2015. Next slide. So the National Housing Strategy Act, I find it interesting. This is actually a federal law that became law in 2019. It actually does mention housing. It is actually a human right here in Canada. So I just want to read it. Whereas housing is essential to the inherent dignity and well-being of the person and to building sustainable and inclusive communities, as well as a strong national economy in which the people of Canada can prosper and thrive, whereas access to affordable housing contributes to achieving beneficial social, economic, health, and environmental outcomes, whereas improved housing outcomes are best achieved through cooperation between governments and civil society, as well as meaningful involvement of local communities. Next slide, please. So we've known for years that we've been lacking affordable housing. We must implement immediate actions to address the affordability crisis that has increased the cost of living here in Calgary. You know, the many hundreds of dollars per month that many folks have had increased to their rent, including myself, is unsustainable. Without collaboration of all the civil sector, public, all levels of government, this housing crisis will only get worse. That's some of our paramedics treating someone there on the streets, as you can see. Next slide, please. So in 2020, the School of Public Policy studied the cost of homelessness. $87,000 per person per year is what we, the public, pay for one person to be maintained in homelessness. I'm sure we're very familiar with the facts of that. Housing, of course, was $30,000. Next slide. So it's very clear we're already all paying for this housing crisis one way or another. Next slide, please. We are all, there we go, next slide. We have an opportunity to create a city that leads the country in access to safe, equitable, timely access to housing. Our hopes at Be the Change and our prayers are that we seize this moment to create the change that people are literally crying out for. We encourage council to use all the tools provided and approve them to build more affordable housing in Calgary. I just want to add 3 points that I really liked in this plan, and I read the previous plan, which had some nice language in it. This plan has more details, like 3,000 affordable housing units per year. That's a key, very important detail. Talking about the rezoning, this is something that I think must happen because we have been growing and sprawling the city out, which increases property taxes as fire, EMS, and all of that are spread thinner. To build a denser city makes more sense. The other piece is the advocacy component at the very end to other levels of the government. It is very important that we slow down the pace of folks entering homelessness and ask the province for a rent cap. So thank you all for having me. I see my time's up. There might be a couple more slides, but yeah.
Your time is up. Thank you so much, Chaz. Sarah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Woodgate, and I'm here for Calgary Housing Company. At Calgary Housing Company, home is what we do. We work with people every day. This council is having the opportunity to hear from people for 3 days. This is what we do. We work in people's homes to help them. We serve 27,000 Calgarians. And we offer a lot of housing options that's been discussed here, We administer rent supplements, we provide social housing, and we also provide rental housing. I'd like to thank the task force, and I'd like to thank city administration for bringing forward this really bold housing strategy. Housing is a system, and what we're seeing at Calgary Housing Company every single day is that that system is collapsing at the bottom and in the middle. And so we currently have a 0% vacancy rate, essentially. We offer thousands of rental housing units on Rent Faster, and when they become available, they are gone in an hour. We have never had this type of compression in the housing system. Our rents at Calgary Housing used to be about 90% of market rent, but the market has changed so much. We are so far below that people are not able to move out of our rental housing, because where are they going to go? We also have a significant backlog in the social housing. We're receiving 600 applications a month. We used to receive 300. People have to apply every year. So when you see the wait list number, there are many, many more people waiting for housing, but it's about 5,700 households on the wait list. And there's only 2,700 social housing units left in the city. Those units were built in the post-World War II housing boom, and they're old. They need significant repair. And so it's backlogged in terms of people being able to get into housing and people being able to move on. We used to have 1,500 households a year move out of CHC, and they move into market housing and home ownership. And it is backlogged. So we're really excited about this bold plan, and we're really excited about the goals, particularly related to non-market housing. Non-market housing is such a key component. However, market housing is as well. The market provides about 78% of housing to households, and we want it to stay there. And so I'm so pleased to see the goal of 1,000 units a year that would have not been built, as well as 3,000 non-market housing a year. We need that significantly. You've heard a lot from people today about their experiences. A couple of the key points of the plan that I just want to touch on is that we need to also maintain the housing that we have. And I'm very pleased that there are some clauses in the plan that speak about that. The City of Calgary has taken significant leadership in repairing and renovating and regenerating the homes that the city owns, as well as the City of Calgary has helped fund CHC to repair our assets. And we're very pleased to see that in the strategy, because these homes can be improved and the life cycle doubled, much less than building new. The other thing is we're very excited to see the land acquisition proposal of $20 million. Over 50% of neighborhoods have no non-market housing, and that number is growing and growing. It's probably a little higher now. That was a few years ago as the city grows. And so the land acquisition will be a key pivotal policy that will help secure land in all neighborhoods. And so Calgary Housing Company is excited about the pilot. We'd also like to see consideration for that number being higher in the $100 million range. And the other piece is that there's a lot of land opportunities in terms of buildings. And this isn't in the plan, but would like to recommend consideration. Acquisition is a huge opportunity right now. We've heard about people being evicted due to rent increases. It is possible to buy buildings, and it's happening in BC, in order to acquire them and maintain them as affordable perpetual rental. And so also, I know that this is an ambitious plan and that those are some immediate actions. I'm really excited to see the long-term actions in here. This is a strategy that will be implemented over time. And this didn't happen today. This has been happening for decades, and so it's going to take time. And so I'm really excited to see those long-term strategies. CHC is very excited to get to the table and roll up our sleeves and work with the city to deliver on the ambitious plans, as well as to collaborate with the private sector and the nonprofit sector and government. I hope that the other governments, I think they're watching. It's really, really important that the city is taking this leadership, and I thank you. And also, we would like to work with you to encourage the province and the federal government to also contribute. It requires a lot of coordination. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Celia.
Hi there, I'm Celia Lee. I'm here speaking on behalf of Sustainable Calgary. I've also been a consultant on research and policy in Alberta and Ontario over the last decade, often with a focus on poverty reduction. I'd like to thank the task force and city administration for thoughtful and elegant work here. Through our State of Our City report, Sustainable Calgary looks at sustainability from multiple angles: economy, health, governance, environment, education, community. Recognizing these are interrelated, and that when we take action in our city, we should be looking for win-win scenarios across these dimensions. And we applaud the housing strategy for outlining its own win-wins on page 9. You've heard some pretty solid information, I think, over the last 2 days in favor, and so I'll just add 2 things. And the first is that we do need more housing on our existing footprint. And that's not just to meet our climate goals. How we structure housing affects our access to affordable, convenient transportation, which is one of our top 3 household expenses. So increasing density makes low-cost transportation options more feasible, and that's both to build it and to use it. Options like transit, walking, and cycling. A study done for the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation in 2011 showed that if households in Calgary could get rid of just 1 car, the amount of housing they could access increases by 1,700%. So encouraging affordable housing near transit and shifting to RCG helps support more affordable lifestyles above and beyond just affordable homes. The second thing I'll mention is what we've heard from the communities we've worked with. For the last decade, we've collaborated with communities to sketch out what they want their neighborhoods to look like, how they would evolve to meet local needs and priorities, and how to improve health and health equity. We pair design work with the best available research on health and city building, and residents have taken this work beyond just visioning. In fact, they've used it towards built projects in every community we've worked in, from small pilot projects to multi-million-dollar investments. We've worked in several of your wards, including Councillor Chabot, Councillor Dhaliwal, Councillor Penner, Councillor Walcott, and Councillor Carraw. And several of your communities told us, unprompted, about their desire for more housing choice, and it looked different in every community. So in one community, residents were concerned with maintaining the quality of aging single-family rental stock, and they wanted redevelopment that would provide high-quality, dignified, affordable multifamily housing for their local families. In Marlborough, we heard from folks who wanted to live closer to their elders, but not fully share the same home. So the idea of laneway and parkway housing emerged. In Acadia, we heard from seniors who wanted to downsize, but stay near their kids, many of whom were coming back to Acadia. They talked about wanting more housing choice in their neighborhood, though not necessarily on the same property as their kids. In Bridgeland, seniors were particularly active in expressing their needs. Bridgeland includes many seniors' homes where folks have expressed feeling isolated, and we heard that a lot in Acadia as well, actually. But in Bridgeland, seniors talked about being surrounded by parking lots and wanting more nearby walkable amenities. And saying that they felt, again, isolated from their neighbors. So through community discussion, Bridgeland decided to attract more development near seniors' homes so they could have amenities at the street level and more opportunity to bump into their neighbors, pardon me. So the common thread here is that folks wanted housing choice, and they wanted housing that was dignified and affordable in order to facilitate multi-generational living and aging happily in place, which is becoming important because in 10 years, 1 in 5 of us will be seniors. From my perspective, the housing strategy can bring those visions closer to reality. So again, I'd like to thank the task force and admin for such competent work, and I would urge you to please accept the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. Byron.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah, go ahead. You've got 5 minutes.
Okay, good, great. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mayor Gondek, and members of council. My name is Byron Miller. I am a professor of geography at the University of Calgary and want to speak in support of the recommendations of the Housing and Affordability Task Force and the Calgary Housing Strategy, but believe additional measures are needed, and I will try to be succinct and limit my comments to 5 points. 1, Densification is one part of an effective strategy to produce more and a greater variety of housing in an efficient manner. The city already has a broad framework to do this that has been widely reviewed and strongly endorsed by citizens and council alike, the MDP. The MDP calls for 50% of all growth since 2009 to occur in established areas by 2069. This is a modest target that would achieve densities in the ballpark of Los Angeles. Unfortunately, the city has not identified an effective mechanism to make this happen. Such a mechanism does exist, however, the local area planning process. The problem is there is no linkage between the targets of the MDP and the LAP process. This actually came up in the Riley Communities LAP process, where I'm a member of the working group, when one of the participants, the former City of Calgary planner, asked the city's planners to, quote, tell us how many dwelling units you need and we'll help you figure out where to put them. There was no response. This is exactly the approach that is needed, aligned with the statutory requirements of the MDP, guided by citizen collaboration and knowledge, and achieving the densification and increased housing variety that is needed. We need to link the local area planning process to the targets of the MDP so we can actually achieve the densification targets laid out in the MDP. To date, in the absence of linkage, we have fallen far short. 2, achieving the non-market housing targets laid out by the task force will require substantial funding. To this end, the adoption of land value capture mechanisms, such as density bonusing, which is already used in specific contexts in the city, are absolutely critical. Through densification and infrastructure investment, the city will substantially increase land values, quite possibly resulting in tens of billions of dollars of increased land values citywide. This increased land value should be captured to benefit the public, not private land speculators. Land value capture mechanisms can be a very substantial source of funding for non-market affordable housing and for related purposes such as land acquisition for affordable housing. 3, reducing parking requirements is a significant component of housing affordability. To make this work, however, we must provide more robust public transit and active transportation systems, which requires coordinated land use and mobility planning, a core underlying principle of the MDP and CTP. If we are to move away from automobile dependence, we have to do a much better job of providing desirable alternatives. This is a critical component of any strategy that addresses housing and affordability. 4, the city needs to monitor and regulate short-term rentals. Secondary suites were supposed to be a source of affordable housing, but there is a great deal of anecdotal evidence that many secondary suites, as well as townhouses and condos, are being diverted towards short-term rentals and away from the provision of long-term affordable housing. Evidence from Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto shows that restricting short-term rentals to homeowners' residences can return thousands of units to the full-time housing market. Then 5, we need to consider rent control. This is a virtually taboo topic in Calgary, but it shouldn't be. The discussion to date on this issue has been mostly unnuanced and misleading, suggesting that all rent control policies apply to new rental construction, thereby disincentivizing the construction of new rental housing. That argument, as far as it goes, is correct. But such arguments actually refer to old forms of rent control that have largely been replaced by so-called second-generation policies that exempt new build rental housing. If we are serious about helping people who are struggling right now, as opposed to measures that will help several years down the line, which are obviously also very important, we have to have a serious, factually grounded discussion of contemporary rent control models. I'm very glad that Council is soliciting public input and discussing actions that will address our growing housing crisis. I encourage you to be bold. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron, for joining us today. It just has occurred to me, I believe Sarah indicated that she has a letter for us to distribute. Clerks, are we just able to grab that from her? Thank you. Okay, we'll go to questions of this panel. Councillor Chu.
Thank you, Chair. My question will be for Mr. Manning, please.
Sorry, can you say who that's for again?
Mr. Manning, Kent Manning.
Okay, he's just coming to the podium.
Hello.
Thank you.
All right, he's at the podium. Go ahead, Councillor Chu.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here today. and I'm sure you've been listening for this couple of days on the public hearing. So my question, a couple of questions for you, or three, is the first one is, have you spoken to your neighbors about this issue?
Of course. There's quite a lot of chatter about this. Coffee shops on the block. I talk to my neighbors quite a bit. The consensus that I get from them is where we live in Ward 14 in Mackenzie Lake, this may not be such a big issue because there isn't a lot of empty lots or new development per se, but they are concerned about other areas of the city having, I guess, densification or, traffic issues that result from that. But they also know that there's a dire need for housing. Even in our neighborhood where we never saw it before, 15 or 20 years ago, we never saw any homeless people. Now it seems to be rampant everywhere. It's affecting everything in our lives across the city. So it is a problem that everybody is concerned about. A lot of people are watching today. They're listening, and although they can't be down here, I had the possibility or the pleasure to come down here and speak. I'm not going to speak on behalf of them, but I just thought it was important for to get input from a variety of people, I guess. So I did talk to my neighbors, and I think that all of them are concerned, and they're knowing it's going to affect our city because we have rampant homelessness, we have crime on the rise, housing prices are out of control. Like it's younger people in our neighborhood, they're just giving up hope because they know that they can never own a house in the current situation.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Thank you. So my second question, in part, you have answered, is that once this blanket zoning of upzoning of RCG as the base form without single house, which means that each lot, like you're living right now in Mackenzie Town, is that for up to 4 to 6 or more or less with basement secondary suite allowed to be in the mid block, right on your block. What do you think your neighbor would think, and yourself too?
I don't think that's a good idea.
No parking requirement.
What was that again, Councillor?
Without parking requirement.
Oh yeah. Okay. So on our block, with the new secondary suites thing that was approved a while back, somebody's suite actually was, I guess, grandfathered into being legal. It's always a parking issue because they park on the corner of the block on a close kind of cul-de-sac, and it's a safety issue. Excessive vehicles. Sometimes when you've had people coming around the corner, there's extra cars parked there. It becomes a real safety issue. I don't think that people would really like that. Not to say not in my backyard or whatever, but I think there's other places where it can be developed on the fly, like with existing properties, where if something comes up for sale, it could be rezoned or allowed to be build something on the end of the block. I know my developer friend, he looks at corner lots quite regularly because he can make more profit on them. In that kind of situation, I think it's a good idea to allow it, but not in every neighborhood. I think it should be looked at with the consult of developers, city planners. We have a housing crisis, but I don't think you should just have a blanket upzoning. So that's just going to cause chaos. People are not going to like that at all. It's not going to go over very well at all.
Okay. So my last one is, do you have anything else to say you want to say?
Okay, I was wanted to mention before, couldn't quite talk fast enough, I guess, but my developer friend, he has a number of properties around the city, probably 50 development properties, and normally builds infills. And in one particular case, he had a corner lot, and it has taken him almost 2 years to get the development permits and building permits. In the meantime, the property has sat empty, become an eyesore. At one point, it was a little bit of illicit activity happening there that had to be addressed. makes for chaos in the neighborhood. This property in particular it's on a bus route, it's in an area where there's a lot of other infills already, and that's why he's recommending that you immediately move from RC1 to MC1 or 2, so that any of these permits that are sitting on somebody's desk at City Hall can be immediately fast-tracked, because these are houses that people need. It will actually cause people go to work right away building these homes, and there might actually be an effect of less people being homeless. If we can have more supply of housing, it will actually bring down the prices a little bit. If there's, like anything, if there's oversupply, prices go down. If there's something's in rare supply, prices go up. And that's all I have to say, I guess. So,
thank you. Thank you so much for your time again, and thank you, Chair. That's it.
Thank you.
Councillor Wong.
Thank you, Chair. And Ms. Woodgate, thank you. Sir, you've seen the details of the housing strategy, so I'm just going to be very precise. Section 2C, C3, advocate to the province, and there's a number of subpoints in there about advocacy. From your perspective as a lead of Calgary Housing, is there things that we can do, similar to this, but things that we can do ourselves within our own municipal bylaws and within the mandate of Calgary Housing? So in other words, rather than just go to the province, I mean, we control our own stock.
The city of Calgary has invested, I don't know if you can, there it is, has invested tens of millions of dollars in their housing. There's a portfolio that was previously social housing and now is in mixed income social. And then most of the new developments built in the last 30 years, they're mixed income. There's 340 units currently under construction and 650 on the way. In terms of renovation and repair, the CHC owned units as well have received investment from the city. All of that housing operates without subsidy, except the first one. And so it's on a break-even basis. And we're able to have reserves. We're building those still because they were fairly new, as well as we are able to offer homes for $450 a month rent, and our top rent is $1,700. And so it's mostly a social enterprise, and we're really excited about that and the potential and the opportunity to have more housing under that model throughout the city. In terms of capital repair, there's still work to do. If we keep going on the track that we're on, when you look at the city infrastructure report, you can see we've made significant improvements. And so there's still work to do, but most of the units have been improved. A few years ago, they had never been renovated, the older stock, and they've been renovated. And the buildings are getting re-enveloped. We've doubled the life cycle on a number of buildings, which is amazing. It can be a fraction of the cost to building new. And so we're excited about that. We're pleased to keep going on the same track. We still continue to request investment to improving capital. And we're pleased to see that's in the plan, if that's what you were asking.
Yeah, no, again, I just thank you for the work that you do for Calgary Housing and the city-owned assets. On the other side of the assets, which are provincial assets, again, same sort of question. Is there anything that we can really be pushing the province to do for you?
Calgary Housing Company could use the support. Every year, the city, in their budget letter to the province, indicates the required capital and the required operating for the provincial portfolio. If I can, I'm just going to explain that portfolio. Social housing that was created in the post-war era up until 1990 operates not on a break-even social enterprise model. It provides housing to 100% of people who need it, that are on the wait list, and that's where the housing is aging. And so we've only been receiving, even with the support of the city in those budget letters, 30 to less than 30% of the capital required year over year over year. And we're receiving significant operating costs. As the capital maintenance is deferred and pushed back, the operating costs are now skyrocketing. And so we're at a pivotal moment where you've heard from some people speak about their experience living in housing, and that's the challenge with social housing. Any housing isn't good enough. We need adequate housing and people to deserve to live with pride and dignity and safety. And so whatever help we can have from the city on that would be appreciated. I think the other piece is the strategy is really bold. So being able to have new land, regeneration, we have a number of projects underway that were older housing that we're now rebuilding with even more units. And that's in this plan, and so it's very exciting as well, because we're kind of doing catch up because social housing wasn't built since 1990. And those, 2,700 units. In 1950, our population was 120,000 in Calgary. And then we were growing about 6 or 7%. Huge growth. In 1970, it was 389,000 households. But now we're talking about 1.5 million people, and we don't have more assets in that category class to provide homes. And so I'm really excited about this strategy because we can build more, but we do need to have big action to protect what we have today.
Okay. And you made reference to buying, if I remember you correctly, buying other portfolio that put it within your control. How big of a price tag is that?
So it would be fast and quick to be able to buy units under construction, units being built in the pipeline. And also, we have acquired in the past. So acquisition has been a strategy over various funding periods where we're able to acquire a building, and then over time, as there's turnover, we can transition the buildings. The huge goal right now of that would be there is a lot of real estate available, and we would be able to secure more housing as perpetual affordable housing. And I know we're talking a lot about rent increases. We see that a lot, and we have a lot of stories for the rent supplement program. But having more perpetual affordable rental housing is one of the biggest strategies we can have. If there was competition in the non-market housing side of things, perpetual affordable rental, for example, that would help with the rent prices. And so an acquisition strategy would also help people that you've heard from here, very fearful about severe rent increases. And so I do suggest that that is a strategy that has worked well in the past and should be considered.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other questions for this panel. Thank you all for joining us today. All right, I'm going back to my list. Okay, Karen Gosley. Mohammed Chowdhury. Patricia Grimwald. Abid Shah. Linda Leger. Beanie Schweiter. Candace Chambers. Natalie St. Hilaire. Angus Ho. Peter Dormaar.
I'm here.
Okay, Peter, you're first on this next panel.
Okay.
I'm Candace. I'm here. I'm so sorry.
Sorry, is that Candace?
Yeah, I'm Candace.
Candace Chambers? Okay, Candace, you're going to be second on this panel. Okay. So Peter and Candace, just mute yourselves for a few seconds here. Desiree Stoodley. Okay, Desiree, you're third on this panel. Harpooni Man. Jon Kozak.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, John, you are number 4 on this panel. Gregory Deach. Brian Chen. Brenda Tackaberry. All right, Brenda, you are number 5. Okay, so everyone online, just making sure that you are muted. And the people that I have in this panel then are Peter Dormaar, Candace Chambers, Desiree Stoodley, Jon Kozak, and Brenda Tackaberry in that order. So if we will start with Peter. Peter, your 5 minutes is ready. So whenever you are ready, you can start. And it looks like you have a presentation, and Clerks has that up.
Okay, great. So, yeah, if we have the first slide up, that would be great. There's a bit of a lag for me, so I can't see it. But hello, Mayor, City Councilors, and members of the public. Thank you for letting me speak. It's been so inspiring to listen to such great speakers before me on this issue. My name is Peter Dormaar, and I'm a resident of Crescent Heights, and I'd like to speak in favor of the housing strategy. I have a background in urban studies and management analytics. I have many opinions on this subject, but for this meeting, I want to share the thoughts of other Calgarians. To study this issue, I created a program that uses large language models to read social media comments. It can quantify the popularity of subjects online, and I found it can be used as a megaphone for popular sentiment. I had it analyze 30,000 comments in the Our Calgary Reddit community over the month of August to identify statements where people have mentioned a cause to the housing crisis and a solution to the housing crisis. It identified 600 comments that recognize the housing crisis as an issue and 100 comments that propose a solution to it. Of all comments that are housing related, a quarter of them focus on how unaffordable housing is. So the first slide shows what people on Our Calgary recognize are causes of the housing affordability crisis. So slide 1 shows the number of statements perceived as causes of the crisis. The top perceived cause is rent gouging. While this can refer to excessively high market rent, many of these people are citing rent pricing that's irrational and that's above market rates. I've read a lot of these comments, and it's important to recognize that these aren't just numbers, but real people. On August 17th, someone wrote, "My lease is up next month. Been here 6 years, been paying $1,400 a month for those 6 years. The townhouse I live in goes for $4,000 a month. So my 3 kids and I will move in with family to a 3-bedroom house where there are already 2 kids and 4 adults. And with the barely above minimum wage money I earn, it's looking like I will never live on my own again. This is what I've been working for my whole life. Hooray." Another comment wrote, "It's been 15 years and I'm still renting. I currently pay about 70% of my take-home pay to rent. It is impossible to save anything, let alone tens of thousands of dollars for a down payment, living like this." The second highest category is tenant rights and landlord immorality. This includes things like people indicating they have personally or through others heard about discrimination, scam listings, racism, or overall landlord greed. One commenter of these said, "There isn't a supply issue though. There's plenty available, and hundreds that have been sitting empty for the past 6 months, charging $250 application fees, and plenty more that have been sitting empty while increasing their desired rent. I've been watching this very closely since I was planning on moving back to Calgary. If this was driven by supply and demand, those vacant places would be reducing their prices, not increasing them if they're still sitting vacant after months on the market, but they're not. You think those places collecting $250 every time someone wants to apply are really still vacant because not a single applicant has been approved?" So after reading this, I researched this, and there's no law in Alberta prohibiting application fees, and this commenter is suggesting that some landlords will make more money by charging for them than filling their units. Next down the chart are immigration, poor urban development, and poor urban development and planning. The planning section includes land designations that aren't dense enough, and the city not having diverse enough housing types for different lifestyles. Finally, there is high demand and housing shortage. On the subject of high demand, one comment on August 4th wrote, Looking for a new rental place, there are 100 to 150 applications for every unit. There are not enough rental spaces per need. As such, many will go homeless. Next, I'll share the 95 identified solutions that Redditors mentioned to the housing crisis, and that's on slide 2. So the highest number of proposals call for government and nonprofit affordable housing, then densification, then rent control, and finally more government funding. These solutions overlap with the 3 levels of government, but things like affordable housing, densification, and transit-oriented development are among others, are all within the control of the city. I want to talk a bit about the constraints of the study's process. So
Peter?
First, it's only looking at, yeah.
My apologies, your time is up.
Okay.
So just hang on the line, and if there's questions for you, we will come back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Candace Chambers, you are next.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You've got 5 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. So I want to tell a story of my family. Right now, we are living in our too small upper level house, which could have been rented for the amount we're paying for the top, which is $2,600. And the bottom is being rented out for $14. But me and our downstairs neighbor both got a call, not a call, I'll call it a threat, that our rent is going to be increased by $400. And we should be grateful that he's not charging us more because his other tenants can't afford it. That is insane. The fact that me and my family went from living in a large single-family home we had our privacy because there's 8 of us. We went from living in a home for $2,100 to being rent-evicted, moving here for $2,600, which is a step down from the house that we came from in the first place. Then, to be threatened when we were the only tenants and very much admitted by the landlord that have been paying rent for the last 8 months. And this is what he does to both me and my downstairs neighbor. Kids need stability, and there are so many kids. There are kids in our home. There needs to be rent control, and I completely support all 33 points that were recommended by the committee. I just need the city council to listen to the people of Calgary. I've heard a lot of voices today that were people representing the haves, the owners. I understand you own your homes, and that's great. I love that for you. But there are people that don't have that. And this is what the recommendations are trying to open the door for. City council needs to listen to these things, because if we don't get these things, where are we going to go? Everything is raising, and no matter what we do, we look at properties that were less in 2019, as an example, that were under $2,000 be at $3,000 and $4,000 plus. That is egregious. Like many other Calgarians, I moved from Ontario with my mom to be here. And I've just watched the decline of standards, of morality in housing, and it's a human right. And it's very concerning that something as small as rezoning is a thing that could stop this. It is very important for us to make sure that young people, including me, have a way to rent or buy a home if they so choose. I work every day. My partner works every day, and we both cannot move out of our parents' homes because we simply can't afford it. That is insane. I need people to really think this through of what you could be rejecting and what you are letting young people walk into. It's not good. And I remember promises of the older generations making it better for the younger. And right now, it just feels like y'all are having fun torturing us. And it's genuinely disheartening to have to grovel for a basic human right. It's genuinely disgusting to me, and I really don't like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace, for joining us today. You can just hang on the line and mute in case there's any questions for you. Desiree. Do you want to be Desiree? I also have Izzy in brackets. Is that like Izzy's good? Okay. Can you hear me? 1 second. Now, we'll be able to hear you now. Go ahead.
Hello? Okay. So, yeah, Izzy's good. Courtney, you're Ward 11, right?
Sure am.
Hey, me too. It's good to actually talk to you. So, and council, good to see everybody. We've heard a lot of different things in the last couple of days, and I would come at you with stats and slides, but I feel like you've got enough of that already. So I'm just going to try to be as clear as possible about my personal feelings about this. I support the 33 recommendations. I do understand some pretty valid concerns about things like environmental impact. Like the tree canopy thing is something that I'm worried about as well. And things about like, it's funny to come offline where there are people talking about climate change like it's a real thing and not just saying that it's fake or it's like alien space lasers that are setting fire to BC's forests or whatever. So climate's a real concern, and how we build things and what materials and sustainability, that all matters. However, I really want to be blunt about a couple things. One is that I feel like we're talking a lot about building affordable housing and supply and demand, and that's a huge factor, but not how unaffordable housing is when there is the supply. Now, I'm not trying to be some commie liberal or whatever, and I've been told my whole life that if I stopped being a lazy millennial and stopped eating avocado toast and just save money, I'd be a billionaire. That hasn't panned out. And I am struggling to pay my folks' rent at home, and I'm lucky. Even though I don't make a lot of money and I barely have any shifts, I do love my job and I love my company. I've paid other people's security deposits so they don't end up homeless. Even though I have no money, even though CRA is down my ass, pardon my language, about trying to claw back CERB because they think I don't qualify. Fine, whatever. But I have ADHD, trying to not to rant. I know I only have 5 minutes. Trying to not sound as unhinged as I did in the CTV interview. You can't arrest people out of homelessness. Right? We all agree on that, right? You can't arrest people out of addictions and stuff. You can't arrest them out of mental health crises, and I know because I was in crisis stabilization in 2020, even though I have it so much better, just because I have parents who haven't kicked me out yet, even though I've struggled to pay them back for all the things they invested in me. And even among white people, among settlers, I'm pretty lucky. But I know people lost to opioids. I know people, it's hard to participate in groups about LGBTQ stuff because half the conversations are about people getting kicked out of their homes or not being able to afford rent or places to live. And I can't do anything about that because I can't afford to live in the house that I'm not even paying for. There's one comment in Facebook conversations about this that really stuck with me. Because of all of the things I've gotten wrong or right over the last 30 years, this is something that has bugged me. And I've lived in Calgary my whole life. Out of the 6 months, there's only 6 months out of my 30 years that I have my own place, and it was when I was teaching overseas. And they covered my housing because I was doing a job that they considered important. And that was the communist Chinese government helping some honky afford housing. But the thing that, the Facebook comment that really stuck with me is some guy, why would you pay your barista $35 an hour? Reminds me of conversations we had decades ago. Why do burger flippers need $15 an hour? EMTs don't get $15 an hour. That's not a sign of anything but your labor being undervalued. If your barista works 40 hours a week, I'm not doing that right now, but if they're working 40 hours a week and they can't afford food or housing, what the hell do you think is going to happen to them? You're not going to get coffee. So I want you guys to consider not just this, but even more, because it's really desperate out there. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Izzy, for joining us. You can have a seat, and if there's questions, we can ask those to you in just a second. Jon.
Hello.
Jon, we can hear you. Go ahead. You've got 5 minutes to make your presentation.
All right, perfect. Thanks. Good day, or I guess it's good evening, Mayor, members of Council. Thank you for, I guess, taking the time to listen to all of us. And yeah, especially thanks to everyone that's told their story. That's probably one of the most valuable things that I've gained to this point, is just hearing all these diverse perspectives. And yeah, diversity is kind of like the main item that I've taken away from all of this. Just as a background, so again, my name is Jon Kozak. I'm not born and raised Calgarian, although I have spent the last 10 years in this area, at least the local area. And yeah, it's really become the place that I live, work, and play. And I'm fortunate to raise a family at. My background is in urban forestry, initially in horticulture. I studied at UBC most recently. I was one of the first graduates of the Master of Urban Forestry Leadership program. One of 10 students. This new global online program is pretty exciting, but actually Calgary should be more excited because there was 2 of us out of the 10 people that chose to enroll in it, because we do have a passion for the urban forest. And just going through some of the feedback of this particular topic, I see a lot of stuff relating to trees, and that's one of the areas that I was hoping to focus more on to. I certainly do see significant value in affordable housing, and I do support the recommendations that are put forward. As many people had previously said, there are some additional steps. So it's kind of, I agree to this but the and is kind of the next phases that really hit on some of the items that still might be missing. Unfortunately, rent control is probably one of the strongest items that might solve some of our problems, but it's not in play from what I've heard recently. But with that said, getting back to urban forestry, there are unfortunately cases like we're in a prairie city, and I do have to thank the people that over 100 years ago thought to plant trees in the city and see the value in maintaining the ones that were already here. Interesting story to that, I had hosted a James Walk earlier this year, thanks to everyone that kind of advertised that event and got me excited to do that. It was the first tour that I had ever offered, and I did so at Crescent Heights because interestingly enough, at the Crescent Heights Park, there is one remaining poplar tree. It's 100 years old as of this year, and yeah, that came about thanks to volunteers and the surrounding communities seeing the value of trees and and not being held back by the limitations that existed at the time, and they got trees planted. It was one of the earlier years when the city was celebrating an Arbor Day event, something that we've been fortunate to have since it was only a couple of years ago where we stopped doing it, and that was the unfortunate thing with COVID. But hopefully that is something that we can revisit again in the near future, because when it first started, it was even a celebrated holiday, and there are a lot of values that are provided by trees. But fortunately, recent reports have noted that there is an imbalance in the city, and tree equity is a major topic, especially in the U.S., where tree equity scores came about and were formulated through research, but heavily mapped. Exciting news yesterday, the U.S. ended up passing $1 billion that went to the U.S. Forestry Services, so that channeled out to a bunch of organizations and cities that are in need of really reviewing tree equity in the cities and driving forward some actions and plans to get to it. And with my remaining minute, I think that's where we're kind of at. Like, we are losing some trees in areas, but we also do have an imbalance of some species that aren't necessarily going to be adaptable to our future climate. But there also is the need for us to update our urban forestry strategic plan, but as well as our tree species selection. It's kind of allowed a certain limit of species to be heavily planted through the city, and we really need to start getting back to our roots where we do pilot more species, but then also encourage homeowners to plant them by incentivizing either the planting of them or also getting them more available in these nurseries. So I think that's going to be an area where we can capture this. But again, thanks for your time, and I'm welcome to questions.
Thanks, John. Yeah, just hang on the line. If there's any questions for you, we will call you back. Brenda.
Hello, thank you. My name is Brenda Tackaberry. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here to engage with you all today. I'm a born and raised Calgarian, so I've lived in Calgary now for 40 years. I was a student for 8 years at the University of Calgary, so I felt the struggle for affordable housing when I spent that time renting. I am now a homeowner, and I am still continuing to feel the pressures of affordability within our city. You may recognize my name from my advocating of accessible parking fees in the city of Calgary. I would like to thank the 10 councillors who brought forward a motion to reconsider that to fees that were more equitable for all Calgarians and more accessible for all Calgarians. So I commend you for that. My current area of expertise, I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. And what the research shows is that teams that are inclusive, where people feel heard and have a diversity of thought, show substantial increase in creative problem solving, substantial increase in innovation, and substantial increase in profit margin. So leaving Calgarians out of the civic process and the rezoning will be a big mistake for the business of Calgary and for Calgarian engagement and disenfranchisation. Councillor Sharp made a really great motion to reduce by half the time it took for development permits to be processed. That recommendation was reasonable, still provided additional privilege to developers while not excluding Calgarians from the civic process. I'm surprised and disappointed that her motion wasn't even considered or discussed. The first 15 years of my career was spent as a mechanical engineer. My job, my area of expertise back then, was to evaluate problems, review data, and come up with solutions. What I've seen so far from the recommendations for the blanket upzoning is that there is no data to show that upzoning, blanket upzoning and increasing density improves affordability. There's no case studies from different cities that shows that blanket upzoning has a positive impact on affordability. Currently in my neighborhood, the average price per unit of an RCG row home is $585,000. So it appears that that it'll be increasing the housing supply for the wealthy middle class, not for those with medium incomes and below medium incomes. In addition, no data has been provided on what the impact of removing more affordable land and more affordable homes will be to make way for comparably more expensive units. I have a few questions for council. Last fall, you approved changes to the RCG land use zone. You allow up to 3 times the number of units on RCG. You've reduced the parking from 1 stall to 0.5, half of what it used to be. You've opened up the middle of the block to RCG, which substantially increases the number of lots where these units can be built. So my questions are, how has overall affordability been improved by these changes? What was the change to unit price for RCG after making these changes? Has the price gone up, gone down, or stayed the same? What was the impact to rents of these units? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? Has it stayed the same?
Just a reminder, if you are online, please make sure that you are muted. Continue, Brenda.
And my final question was, how do all of these numbers change across different diverse communities across Calgary? So it is very clear to me that more due diligence needs to be done on blanket upzoning to ensure that upzoning is correlated with an increase in housing affordability. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brenda. We have a couple questions for this panel. Councillor Krog, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for Ms. Tackaberry. I was expecting to hear a lot from the no side about the disenfranchisement argument, and I haven't heard it really yet today, but you brought it up. So I need you to be very clear with me how increasing homeowners' rights across the city with regard to what they're legally allowed to do with their land disenfranchises people.
So first of all, I'm not on the no side. I'm on the yes side for affordability. I'm an advocate for affordability in Calgary, so I would put myself on the yes side. But when I spoke to disenfranchisation, that was in relation to removing Calgarians from the civic engagement process and not allowing them to engage in developments and how their communities are developed.
So you think that, so your argument basically is that it's better to have several months of rezoning in which the public can weigh in than focusing that engagement on the next step, which is the development permit process, which is actually the nuts and bolts of how that particular building is going to fit into the neighborhood.
I would love to instead answer with my experience on what public engagement is like during the DP phase of developments. And I would say that that causes a large amount of disenfranchisation because people are trying to engage with the city planners. They're trying to engage with developers. People aren't getting back to us. There's no avenue for us to include local context, which is the cornerstone of good urban planning. And so I would say that you can say that we will have an opportunity to engage in the DP process, but the majority of Calgarians do not feel that their engagement is qualified or accounted for during that process. So if you are to plan to remove engagement during rezoning and rezone everything, then you would need to make substantial changes to the opportunity for Calgarians to engage during the DP phase. And I can tell you through my advocacy with the city and with Calgarians that that is a major pain point for people, is that they don't feel heard.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Walcott.
You mentioned that you're a DEI specialist, or I don't know if specialist was the word. I don't
Expert, specialist.
I am curious about your opinion on the land use process for marginalized communities, if you would consider it to be equitable.
I think you could probably get a better answer from someone who's has a marginalized experience. So are you asking, like, in what way? Like, I've spoken to people from different income levels that have different interests in different developments, but I'm not sure how their experience going through the DP phase or the rezoning phase changes. I just know what...
Sorry, the land use stage.
Land use stage.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about. If you believe that the public hearing process for a land use is equitable. because of your comments around disenfranchisement of removing people from that. I would ask the question about if the process is equitable in the first place.
Well, I know in terms of the city just moved from advertising in the newspaper to only advertising online. And I know that not everybody knows where to look. Not everybody gets notified in the same way that other people do. And that can be a disparity, whether it's your income or your ability to access technology or your proficiency with technology. So that would be one example of how that process is already inequitable.
What about, or do you have an opinion on the way socioeconomic status plays out and who participates in these processes?
I'm sure it does. I'm just not, I have no expertise in how it plays out in the rezoning process.
Okay. I was just asking because of your background, so that's okay. Thank you.
My area of expertise is more in gender diversity in male-dominated work industries.
Okay, I appreciate it.
All right, I am pretty sure I don't see any other questions for this panel. Thank you all for joining us today. Committee, we are going to do one more panel before we break for dinner. I know everyone is tired. We just took our afternoon break a little bit late, so let's push this back. We still have a number of people to go, and we know there's conversation amongst ourselves that still needs to happen. All right, I am going to call some names. Please let me know if you are here. Robert Falconer.
Here.
Okay, just mute yourself and we'll come back to you. You're first on this panel. Jeff Binks.
I'm here too.
Great. We're on a roll so far, 2 for 2. Peter Collins. Darn it, I jinxed it. Michael Simmons. Michael, you can just take a seat on the chairs over there. You'll be third on the panel. Adele Sanoy. Adele, you can take a seat in the chairs, please. You're fourth on this panel. And Juan Pollock. Okay, Corey Fitzgerald. Lou Mearns. Mearns. Okay, Lou Mearns. Okay, so this panel is going to, so I have 5 people now. So Robert Falconer, Jeff Binks, Michael Simmons, Adele Sanoy, Lou Mearns. Robert, you are first. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Council, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Robert Falconer. I'm a doctoral fellow at the London School of Economics and a researcher with the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary. But today I'm here as a private citizen of Calgary in the Woodlands area. I'm also here in my capacity as a new parent with a sleeping, teething 7-month-old. And while I hope to finish my statement and take any potential questions afterwards, if I suddenly drop off, it's to go sing 20 minutes of Baby Beluga to a very fussy child. This might sound odd, but I'm actually not here today to speak necessarily in favor or against the proposal. As a public policy researcher that focuses on the social, economic, and political factors that go into policies and the results they produce, I'm here instead to illustrate the trade-offs faced by these proposed reforms. This trade-off is best exemplified by a paper I recently published on 2 Calgary bedroom communities, Cochrane and Okotoks. Both towns share similar demographics and a similar drive into Calgary. The cost of a nail, lumber, concrete, and labor does not vary wildly between them. But what does vary is the construction of new housing, its variety, and associated costs. Okotoks, constrained by licensing under the Water Act, has had to limit new housing. Cochrane, not under the same tight constraints, issues about 2.5 times the number of building permits, with almost half of these going to new multifamily homes compared to only 16% in Okotoks. And despite growing 3 times faster than Okotoks, has enjoyed housing that is approximately $40,000 cheaper during the same period over the past decade. So why do I bring up these 2 communities? Well, they have a lesson for us on Calgary. On permits, Calgary appears closer to Okotoks. And on total starts, on new starts and total units, it appears somewhere between the 2 towns at per capita rates. Now, restricting housing supply and housing variety does have benefits. It benefits incumbent owners and increases their home values and purchasing power from home equity loans. It gives them larger inheritances for the children and quieter neighborhoods. However, it does come with trade-offs. Research shows that children wishing to return to the neighborhood or town they grew up in must instead move further away to find affordable housing, and as I've experienced personally, incur the wrath of grandparents by taking the grandkids with them. Aging residents must leave their homes as their ability to drive diminishes, and the 10-minute walk to the grocery store turns into a 10-minute drive to the grocery store turns into a 30-minute walk. Businesses evaluating investments consider whether their employees can afford to live nearby. Garmin, for example, recently expanded in Cochrane, creating 200 new jobs from mostly young STEM workers seeking to buy new homes who can afford to reside there, plus an additional 800 jobs that will support them in wraparound services. Does zoning reform work? Empirically, the answer is yes. Minneapolis and Auckland zoning reforms in recent years led to lower rents, while nearby similar cities saw increases. Research from Helsinki shows that even expensive new housing can create moving chains as higher income households vacate older units for new ones and open these older units up to households in lower quintiles. As Calgary approaches these proposed reforms, the predicted results are not in dispute. The dispute then is on the trade-offs and the kind of city that Calgary wishes to create. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for being here with us today. We will now go to Jeff.
Hi there. My name's Jeff Binks, and I am the president of the LRT on the Green Foundation. I wanted to begin with thanking Council for listening to all of the speakers over the last 2 days. I know it's a challenge to remain engaged during such a marathon public hearing, but the true test will be to see if councillors allow their perspectives to shift based on the stories Council has heard. I also wanted to thank clerks and the City of Calgary staff for their work at improving the public engagement process to try to open it up to as many Calgarians as possible. It is so much easier and user-friendly for someone to have their voice heard now than it was even a few short years ago. And I know that has taken work and dedication, so thank you. I'm currently over here in the UK, and when I look at the newspapers here, guess what I see? Here, just like in Calgary, conversations about housing affordability dominate the headline. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me that we are in a global race to find solutions for housing affordability, and the cities that win that race will attract companies and talent from around the world to build their economy. Calgary shouldn't just want to win that race. We need to win that race. Thankfully, Council was ahead of the game and appointed a panel of experts to offer a made-in-Calgary solution to housing affordability. Council should be commended for that, but hiring the experts is the easy part. Actually listening to what they tell you and then acting on it is much harder. Much has been said already about the need for affordable housing, but today I would like to speak to you about the cost of the status quo. Despite all the plans and good intentions, the majority of growth in Calgary is still happening in new communities on the edge of the city, with the 2022 City of Calgary Monitoring Report stating that only 12.6% of growth is happening in developed areas. We can't keep doing the same things and expecting different results. We also can't continue to ask a small percentage of inner-city neighborhoods to do all the heavy lifting when it comes to accepting the development pressures of a growing city. Many hands make light work. And the same is true when it comes to all of Calgary's neighborhoods doing their part to welcome new people to our growing city. The proposals before Council to change the citywide base district to RCG and to target transit-adjacent areas with HGO zoning are the first real policies that stand a chance at dramatically shifting population growth into a state of balance where established and developing communities are attracting equal numbers of people. This is our best shot in making sure that Calgary can afford to build the transit and infrastructure projects that we also need in addition to the housing. The 2019 State of the City report to Council found that achieving the Municipal Development Plan goal for a more compact city growth footprint would result in savings of $16.8 billion in capital costs going forward over the next 60 years, and an annual operating cost savings of $260 million by 2070. For context, the possible capital cost savings are the difference between building all the transit projects on the Route Ahead wish list or none at all. And the possible operating cost savings could easily fund the 10-minute Route Ahead primary transit service that Council wants to see, with over $100 million left over each year. You can't pat yourself on the back for shaving a percentage point off of property taxes with one hand and then vote to saddle Calgarians with a $16 billion infrastructure deficit with the other. Councillors voting in opposition of the RCG zoning are going to have to hand in their fiscal conservative hats, as a vote no would reveal those hats to be nothing but costume pieces. The character of a politician is not found in the speeches they make, but in the voting positions they take. This council now finds itself at one of those moments where true character is revealed, and no true fiscal conservative would vote to burden generations of Calgarian with massive increases to capital spending and operating budgets that will have to be paid for through property taxes. I've been a community advocate down at City Hall for almost a decade. During that time, I witnessed the debate about secondary suites where those in opposition said the world would end if they were approved. They were approved, and the world didn't end. I witnessed the debate about lowering speed limits where those in opposition said the world would end if they were approved. They were approved, and the world didn't end. Once again, we face a moment where those in opposition to RCG's rezoning will say the world will end if it is approved. I'm sorry for the spoiler, but if council votes in favor of all these recommendations, the fabric of Calgary will not be destroyed. The world will not end. But do you know what will happen? For hundreds of thousands of Calgarians, many of whom were represented here over the last few days, their world will finally have a glimmer of hope. For those Calgarians, they will once again see how they have a chance to build a life here, to make Calgary their home in every sense of the word, because we need every Calgarian to feel welcome here and to chase their dreams here. This weekend, council must vote in favor of all the Housing Affordability Task Force recommendations. Now is the time to ensure we are building a city for each and every citizen. Onward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for being here with us today. Michael.
Hi, can you hear me? Cool. Thanks for spending the time to be here today. I wasn't going to speak, but I was just, really interested in what people had to say. I'm 29 years old. The prospect of buying a house feels very, very out of reach for people my age. My girlfriend's rent was raised $200. It's a studio. She's looking for another place to live. Even rent, single rooms are costing $1,000. So, for people like me that want to build a life in the city, the situation feels a bit hopeless. And I've been a bit frustrated hearing from some of these representatives of community organizations, and they seem to have primarily aesthetic concerns, and they're prioritizing that over the housing and well-being of the next generation that needs to a place to live. And we've heard about shade and the historic character of our neighborhoods and the community fabric, and it just feels like I'm having conversations with my friends where they're worried about rent gouging. They're paying 70% of their income on rent and they have 3 jobs. And that's the struggle that we're dealing with. And people that already own homes that, they're doing great. And we even heard someone speak today about, well, I'm worried that my, my property value will go down. I'm sure that's, I understand how he feels that way, but I just don't think his concern should be prioritized over the housing needs of people that are currently out of the market. I'd also like to just reiterate that it's not just housing, but it's affordability in general. So it's transportation as part of that. If the only homes that are being built are on the outskirts of the city, then it's car dependence. You need to have a car to get to work. I was looking for a new job, and there was one of the places I wanted to go. It would take 15 minutes to drive there, and an hour and 15 minutes on a bus route, because it's like 3 kind of winding, unconnected routes, right? So that's way too long. You wouldn't be able to, make that work. And as we sprawl, there's going to be, people have all pointed this out, but higher taxes due to the fees with ambulances and EMS, fire. So the affordability issue, someone else pointed out, it also has to do with transportation. It has to do with, if we can have the ability to own 1 car instead of 2 cars, might be able to bike to work, might be able to walk to the grocery store. We already try to do things like that, but just the way our city is currently being built, it's very hard to live in any way other than owning an automobile and relying on that. So to anyone that's still making up their mind, one last thing I'll bring up. I do feel like, to me, this seems more like a generational divide than an ideological one. I've noticed, the Conservative Party right now, they're being quite aggressive on this issue of housing, and they're tackling what they see as kind of the NIMBY issues that are making housing less affordable for young people. For maybe the more conservative leaning members on council, I'd urge you to kind of think about that, because there are a lot of younger people like me that they might agree with some of the things you have to say, but they'd be really frustrated if you vote in a way that makes it harder for people like me to just find a place to live. So yeah, that's about all I have to say, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Michael, for joining us. The next speaker is Adele.
I've made a lot of edits, so hopefully I can read my scrawl. We've heard a lot of impassioned arguments for affordable housing, but we know the city defines that differently than all of the people who spoke yesterday and a lot of them that spoke today. It seems they want subsidized housing, but this isn't going to solve that, is it? Social housing or subsidized housing is a provincial issue, is it not? As such, this should not be a popularity contest. I have a few questions. Maybe these were already answered, but it would have been helpful for participants in this hearing to have been made aware. With the blanket rezoning, how much will property value increase? Don't you think that will add to the crisis in the lives of the people we heard from and about yesterday? Once the existing RC1 is eliminated and RC2 homes are rezoned, how much will their taxes increase? What will the impact be on those who currently live in those homes? Will they be able to afford to stay and age in place? Or will they add to the existing housing crisis as they exhaust their savings, also keeping up with the city's, NMAX's rate increases, and perhaps too have to try to find alternative homes? What will landlords do when property taxes increase? What will landlords do when their land values double or triple or more? This will further strain the problem because some landlords will increase rent and some will evict and sell to developers, or they will develop. This will compound the problem. We have spoken of rent control and know the province restricts how frequently landlords can increase rent, but not how much. I've seen landlords evict unwanted tenants by doubling their rent just so they could turn a building into condos. Canada had a population of 35 or so million a short while ago. Now 38 million. In 2022, the federal government welcomed 1 million new immigrants. That does not include the hundreds of thousands of refugees under various programs. I would imagine we're on track to have at least another new 1 million immigrants this year. So 4 or 5 of every 38 people are new to Canada and need homes. A lot of them are coming here. Do we have the infrastructure for that sudden influx? Clearly not. Some hotels have no vacancy due to being fully booked with refugees for more than a year, with nowhere else to live. So the federal government caused this problem, and now they come in with a solution? Am I to understand that if Calgary passes this Housing Crisis Act, let's call it that, and that they'll give Calgary money, like they did to London, Ontario recently? What are their conditions? Please read and negotiate any fine print. Oh no, if you modify certain clauses, Calgary gets nothing. That sounds like a deal with the devil. Which leads me to ask another question. What is the fine print in this blanket rezoning that no one's talking about, that has the feds so bent on us not negotiating? What's in the policy? I mean, not just the fact that there will be no opportunity for public hearing on upzone priorities. It's interesting that few are talking about parking. I depend on my backyard garden. 60% lot coverage at 12 meters high on the neighbor lot will end that because of sunlight restriction. I only have a 33-foot lot, so there's not a lot of width to play with. How many units will a federal offer of, let's say, even 100 million buy based on all-in costs per square foot to build these days? 200 units? 300 units? Is it worth their conditions? But what will that money actually be used for? Since they're so bent on getting this through, stand your ground. This is Calgary. Tell them to establish more rational immigration strategies, and tell them you'll take the money and do with it what we need to do to approach their problem in our own creative and unique way. Stand your ground. You know when a fast-talking salesman pushes you for a quick sale? It's a bad deal. And there are things they're hiding. I would like to repeat something mentioned yesterday, that the most environmentally sustainable home is the one already built. This is fact, no matter who says otherwise. If a new blanket zoning comes into effect, then houses are ripped down and thrown into the landfill. Then RCG allows for 4 units on a property, which takes more wood, more resources, so why destroy what's already there? Provide new land, fix the delayed projects you're responsible for, hire more staff to deal with delays, create another team to handle the process start to finish.
Adele, your time is up. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any questions of this panel. Thank you all for... Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. You're right, you're there. Lou Mearns.
Lou.
Sorry, Lou, come on up. I was thinking, wow, we were making great time, and I'm so sorry.
Good day. My name's Lou Mearns. I'm a senior. I'll be 69 on September 21st. So my roommate, he's 82, and he told me back when he was in the real estate market that 1991 there was rent control. And so basically we got this letter, a text saying, Dear Mr. Mearns, all occupants of this home, we hope this email finds you well. We value your tendency and appreciate the positive relationship that we have built together over the years. Both us and the property management team, and on the behalf of the owner, is with regret we must inform you of upcoming change regarding your monthly rent. As of December 1st, 2023, your monthly rent will increase to $22,000. We understand that this increase may cause some inconvenience, but it is necessary to cover the rising costs of property taxes, associated fees, and other related expenses. And so our rent went from $1,600 to $2,200, and they want to kick us out in December, which is the middle of winter. And I said, well, I guess we'll join our homeless people over there. But so we have to have rent controls, like how could they just jump the rent and all of a sudden we go, we can't afford it and we're out of there? It has to be sustainable for what we can afford. So hopefully you get put in rent controls or rent so they can't increase that much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou, for joining us today. We do now have a question for this panel. Councillor McLean.
Thank you. I'll be brief. It's for you, Lou Mearns. Mearns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Earns an M. M and earns an M.
Mearns.
For the money.
Lou,
Cool.
Lou, come on back to the microphone so you can answer Councillor.
Quick question, because I hear you. I hear this all over the place.
Yeah.
People say that in the rent jumps, and maybe rent control will fix this. But then what I'm hearing from, say the landlords, they say, well, no one's doing long-term leases anymore. For that reason, they're just giving you 1-year lease, and then they just don't renew. Because if there was a rent control, they just say, and you weren't on board with that rent, they just don't renew your lease, bump the rent, and then it goes to and then they get a new tenant. So I think it's a problem, but I don't know if rent control works. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think they want to sell the place, but they want such a high price for the where it is, and it's like who would pay $350,000 for a 2-bedroom with a dark living room? You got no air conditioning. It's like you got parking, but the air conditioning is to open up the door, and we did buy an air conditioner, but there's no place to put it. You got to open the door to put it out there, type thing. So, I could go to a small ski village and live cheaper there and have the ski hill in the backyard and a golf course and survive with my old age money. It's your CPP and your old age money. You could survive there. But, it's really nice being here on the river where I could go a bike ride and I could go to, Harvey Passage and raft down the river, and swimming's close. I like where I'm at. But, at this stage in life, you have to make a move, I guess.
Well, I hear I have so many friends or relatives, they've moved out of country where it's cheaper, but we want to keep people here.
Yeah.
So, and here's what I like about this plan. I think the one part I really like is like where we can just build more density, like around transit-oriented designs, towers, apartment buildings. I mean, the more we build of those, I think that's where we find more affordability, maybe than just some row housing. But, anyways, I feel for you, and hopefully.
Well, I think it's tough with the the cost of money is so much that they have to charge more for their places, like a catch-22. You know, they just can't keep on putting the money in, and their money's costing more money. So how are they going to make it up?
Yeah, and of course there's lots of taxes from all levels. But thanks for your time. I really appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Chabot.
Thank you. For Mr. Binks.
Jeff, are you still with us online?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Councillor Chabot has a question for you. Go ahead, Councillor Chabot.
Mr. Binks, you made reference to some capital costs if we don't build more up and we continue to build out. And I believe the policy specifically states the societal cost will be $16 billion. Are you aware of that wording?
Just looking at it now, yeah, it says savings of $16.8 billion in capital costs going forward. So that's what I was quoting.
Okay. And does it reference where that source of funding would be coming from, i.e. offsite levies and others?
No, that would be up to, I suppose, you folks at council to make a decision on where you're going to get the money. But obviously, a $16 billion gap is going to cause a lot more harder decisions from the folks around the council table than no gap at all.
Yeah, I would say probably for new homeowners more than anyone. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all to this panel for being here with us and having this conversation. Council or committee, we are going to take a dinner break. I will let you know who I have left on my list that I haven't called yet. So there's names I have called, but these are the names I have not called yet. Romello McDonald, Adriano De Stefano, Philip Turnbull, Melanie Swales, Lisa Poole, Flora Gillespie, Craig Chandler, Anthony Cox, Zach Kareem, and Gianna Cassell. Those are the names that I have not called yet. I will start with those names and put those into panels when we come back from dinner break. Is half an hour sufficient? Is 45 minutes sufficient? Yes, we're doing 45 minutes. We will return at 7:15.